device, you have a dial for volume control. As soon as you turn it on, you will see a green light. We advise you to use a low volume to protect your hearing. Whenever not in use, kindly turn it off. And if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, we'll ask you to raise your hands and please wait until someone brings you a wireless mic, such as the one I'm using. Whatever is said off mic will not be interpreted. So it's important for you to use the microphone. Thank you. Muy buenos días.
Bien, buenos días. Bienvenidos sean todos al Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Geografía de México y por supuesto a esta conferencia internacional sobre la medición de comercio y
conference on the measurement of trade and economic development. Before we begin our opening session, I would like to introduce the authorities that are joining us this morning. First of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Eduardo Sojo Garza Aldape, Chair of INEGI, or President of INEGI, I'm sorry. Also with us, Mr. Ivo Havinga, head of the Economic Statistics Division of the Statistics Division of the UN. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Ronald Jansen. He is head of the Trade Statistics Division of the Statistics Division at the UN. Also with us is Dr. Enrique de Alvaguerra, Vice President of the Board of Government of INEGI for its National Economic Information System. Finally, I would like to introduce Actuary Arturo Blancas Festejo, Director General of Economic Statistics at INEGI. Welcome all. I will now open the floor to Mr. Ivo Havinga. Tiene usted la palabra.
Dr. Sojo, President of INEGI, colleagues of INEGI, distinguished participants. It's my great pleasure to welcome you also on behalf of Ronald here in Aguascalientes for an international conference on the measurement of trade and globalization. I'm sure that I speak on behalf of all of you to sincerely thank Sojo, Eduardo Sojo for hosting and co-organizing this conference. Let me give you a little bit of history about Aguascalientes, which I found over the weekend. But correcting me when I'm wrong on most of these issues, but I think in the context of this conference, it might be interesting to say a little bit about this beautiful town. It is befitting to meet actually here in Aguascalientes. It's a town that has been created centuries ago as a fortified hub on an international trade route, what they call the silver trade route between Mexico and between the city of Mexico City and Santa Fe in New Mexico, known as what they call the Royal Road of the Interior Land. And now I will try to say it in Spanish. It says in Spanish, El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro. Silver was the driving force that generated the wealth and commitment of then the Spanish government and the will of the colonialists to open up the northern areas. And it created towns, it created jobs for the workers. It built forts and haciendas and churches, of course, because it was part of also the evangelization of the Latin American continent. Then as now, trade brought income, jobs, and lifted people out of poverty while making use of the natural endowments like silver deposits in Mexico and trade in mercury import from Europe. Still, it holds true today, in the 21st century, where Aguascalientes has become a major foreign trade hub and a major city in central of Mexico for multinational enterprises to set up their production chains in automobile and electronic instrument industries that produce high value-added products and brings technological innovations, income and jobs to the countries. Now, in that context, it is good to be here, because the Commission gave us a mandate to actually, to the Friends of the Chair, to formulate a response surrounding that data around international trade and globalization, and particularly look at the overall sort of coherence of business statistics, international trade, investment and related statistics, and macroeconomic, environmental, economic counts to recommend a mechanism to bring these various streams of work that are taking place in the various work programs at national and regional and international level together. There is a significant demand for this data, particularly also because we have to look at the overall quality of that kind of data that we want to work on in the years ahead. Throughout of the conference, I think we should really look at the overall analytical and policy needs for integrated, coherent, short-term structural and macro statistics and related indicators at all levels, the global, national, at the regional levels, because that demand for that data is significant. This is the technological breakthroughs in the way we produce and transport, market and brand products. The production of trade and goods and services has become truly universal, and the integration with existing of new and global fragmented supply and use tables are necessary to understand the various sort of comparative advantages of labor, the production of investments, the use of natural resources, but also look at the legislative environment in which they operate. We will capitalize on a lot of work that has been done in this area. This is an area which have drawn already significant amount of attentions in different ways. The task ahead in the next 3 days of the conference is actually to bring that work together. Tremendous work over the last few decades actually has been on the experimentation and testing of a coherent set of trade-related global accounts and statistics and indicators by a wide set of organizations at the national level, also by academia, and we'll hear a lot about that, also by international organization, and we'll talk about that. It is important in that overall context, in our opinion, that we start to capitalize on this progress over the last decade and start think about articulating a conceptual framework for a new system of extended international accounts. This new conceptual framework should be used to understand the interdependencies and the set of priorities for our various work programs at the various levels. In particular, we should capitalize a multi-track work on such issues as topics as the new global value chain related classifications, trade-related global enterprise group registers, harmonization of international trade and business statistics by addressing bilateral asymmetries, and the harmonization of trade-related homogeneity in national supply and use tables to reduce the heterogeneity in the supply and use tables at the national as well as at the global level. Let me indicate the amount of work that actually has taken place also in the many task forces and the kind of work that they undertake that we actually can capitalize on. The recognition came from the Commission that there was a need to look at the various sort of programs as they are out there or either concluding. One of an important one was on enterprise and trade statistics, like the MEETS project run by the European Statistical Commission led by Eurostat. There's also a whole new program led by OECD and WTO on trade in value added, income and jobs. Here also we start to build on a lot of work that has been done by European research program of WIOT and Axiopol and Axiobase that we're really going to build on. On globalization related concepts and method related to globalization led by those of the UNECE on globalization, on issues related to asymmetries in the various task forces on merchandise trade and trade in services, on statistical units that is on the forefront of many of their minds in terms of the factorless good producers, and so on. So all that work, including the work of the IMF in the Balance of Payments Committee, I think have to be drawn together. In order to be able to draw this together, we have to explore various sort of mechanisms. One of the mechanisms that we have is to continue what we do, and we work in the various sort of multi-task sort of work streams. Another way is also to think, and that option is to us, is to start thinking about creating a new UN Committee of Experts. This UN Committee of Experts on the measurement of trade and globalization is proposed with a vision of generating a collective partnership in response to the needs to provide the necessary resources and the synergies to actually bring all this work together and bring them to fruition. The success of the UN Committee as a mechanism could be considered and taking cue of the work that has been done of the UN Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting that actually in a reasonably very short period came up with an international standard of the system of environmental account, demonstrating that if we are able to bring and rally these resources together, we can come with very useful results for the international statistical community. Turning to the agenda and the participants. It is quite comprehensive, the agenda, and will cover quite some interesting fields. It will provide a perspective both from the macro side as well as the micro side, and it brings and ties together the various sort of dimensions of globalization in terms of the environment, the economy, and society. We have to also look at the list of participants, whether we can cover all these sort of areas quite usefully and effectively. And when you look at that list of participants, this conference brings together an international group of reputed national, regional, and international statisticians and academia to deliberate these issues, in my opinion, in a very appropriate and collective way, and see and forge ways forward in formulating recommendations to the Statistical Commission in 2015. I think together with the hospitality of Dr. Sojo and his team at INEGI and the beautiful round of Ascalientes, will have the ingredients to be successful during this conference. I also would like to recall that, of course, we're in the process of developing the post-2015 development agenda. And I expect that going forward in terms of the more coherent statistics and indicators, that we can feed into that process that is taking part in terms of the sustainable development framework regarding the monitoring and reporting of the post-2015 agenda. Because there are particular goals that make reference to industrialization, growth, and progress that we have to feed into that universal agenda. This all with the intent of providing a better, brighter, green future and a sustainable society free of poverty. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos al señor Ivo Javinga por sus palabras. Cedo ahora el uso de la palabra al doctor Eduardo Sojo. Doctor, adelante.
Muchas gracias. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Welcome all of you to Mexico, to INEGI. I'll do my remarks in Spanish, so if you want to use your tools. Lo primero, saludar y agradecer a nuestros amigos de la Oficina de Estadística de las Naciones Unidas por hacernos socios en la organización de esta conferencia. Muchas gracias a Ivo, muchas gracias a Ronald por hacernos socios. También agradecer a nuestros colegas de la OCDE, de la OMC, de Eurostat. Muchas gracias a Nadim, a Hubert, a Luis de la Fuente y a sus equipos de trabajo. Lo segundo, darles la bienvenida al INEGI. Darles la bienvenida a los que nos acompañan de los organismos internacionales, de las oficinas de estadística, de varios países del mundo, de bancos centrales, de instituciones públicas, de la academia y del sector privado. Decirles a nombre de todos los que trabajamos en esta casa que nos da mucho gusto que nos acompañen y nos da mucho gusto ser sede de una conferencia tan importante a nivel global. Si preguntáramos a los estadísticos oficiales cuáles son los principales desafíos que tenemos en materia de medición de los fenómenos económicos o sociales, sin ninguna duda,
without a doubt, one of the first
que nos darían
topics
como respuesta
that we would be hearing about would be the topic that brings us together today. That is one of the main challenges we have in the world in terms of economic measurement. Perhaps that is why the conference that brings us together today was initially thought out as a regional workshop to measure global value chains. And little by little, it grew. The notion grew to become a very special conference. A very special conference because it brings together the main experts who are working on measurement, international trade measurement, and economic globalization, together with analysts and researchers. Very especially also because, as I mentioned before, proper management of international trade is one of the great challenges we face in terms of official statistics measurements. And this is because, as Eva was saying, the new configuration of international trade production systems are very different to the model we were familiar with in the past. World economy is increasingly structured around global value chains that represent a growing part of added value and world employment. That's why it is said, and I think appropriately, that many of the products that are being traded worldwide, we should stamp them with something that would say made in the world, made in this planet. And if the phenomenon we want to measure has changed, we also need to change the way in which we are measuring. We need to say things as they are. Traditional measurement instruments for foreign trade were not conceived to describe the new fragmented production structures and trade structures that characterize globalized economies. And that needs to be recognized. We, as official statisticians, need to recognize this. Under this context, at INEGI, we are very much aware that we need to develop new techniques, methods, and processes that will allow us to better know how our country fits in economic globalization processes. Therefore, and within the framework of the OECD and Eurostat initiative to generate trade statistics by company characteristics, INEGI recently embarked upon a study that provided information that we did not have before and that is especially useful for public policy. Just to link, the mere fact of linking foreign trade statistics, the customs band, with the statistics coming from the survey, manufacturing surveys, from economic census, provides data that we didn't know of before. We began to know and look in depth how exporting companies work, function, what are their characteristics, which ones are growing, which ones are not growing, what are their needs. And that, without a doubt, is information that is highly important in order to define public policy. Likewise, and within the framework of the Mexican National Account System, this study also allowed us, under a supply and use framework, it allowed us to estimate what we call added value in exports of global manufacturing. And this was also new information, new data that we did not have before, data that surprised many public policymakers, and that information is already determining the kind of public policy to promote that we are creating in our country. In other words, current efforts at the UN Statistics Office, in the OECD, in Eurostat, in the World Trade Organization already include components that will allow us not to have to wait until the end to collect the fruit. I think we're already collecting the fruits of these efforts. But it is clear that this is just the beginning. We have a lot to do, and that's why we will be very encouraged by the debates that occur in the next few days. I cannot conclude this address without telling you 2 or 3 things on behalf of INEGI, the National Statistics and Geography Institute. First of all, yes, we are in Aguascalientes. We are celebrating 26 years of being headquartered in Aguascalientes, and this is the only institution of this size, of this magnitude, that is outside Mexico City. That's why we say that
la cosa pública estando fuera de la
Public
capital.
work can
No
be
tiene uno que
accomplished
estar en
outside
el
of the
ruido
capital. You don't have to
de la
be
Ciudad de México
immersed
para
in the
hacer
noise of Mexico City
estadísticas.
to do statistics.
Decirles también que
And I would
el
also
INEGI
like to
es
tell
una
you that
institución un poco
INEGI is
especial
a special
de nuestra
institution
comunidad.
in our
Es
community.
especial por
And
tres
it's special
razones.
for three
La
reasons.
primera
The
es
first
porque
is
tenemos
because
en
we,
la misma
in the
institución
same
las
institution,
responsabilidades
we are
estadísticas y las
responsible
responsabilidades
for
geográficas.
statistics
Solo
and
Brasil
geography.
y México
Only Brazil
tenemos
and
esa
Mexico
característica.
have this feature
Esa
in
decisión
our
se tomó en
respective
nuestro
institutions.
país
And this
a
decision was
finales
made in
de
our
los
country in the
70s.
late
Fue
1970s.
una decisión
And it
visionaria
was a visionary
porque hoy
decision
todo
because today
queremos georreferenciar.
we want to georeference
Queremos
everything.
ponerlo en
We
el
want to
territorio.
establish
El
it
hecho
in
de
a
tener
territory. And
las dos
because
responsabilidades
we
en la misma institución nos
are in
da una
charge of
enorme ventaja.
both responsibilities in the same institution
Segundo,
provides a great
somos
advantage.
también un tanto
Secondly,
especiales
we are somewhat
porque
special
somos
because
una
we
institución
are a
constitucionalmente
constitutionally
autónoma.
autonomous
Todas
institution.
las oficinas de estadística
All
del mundo
statistics offices in the
buscan
world
ser
seek to be
independientes.
professionally
Así están
independent.
los principios
That
fundamentales de la
is
estadística
established in the fundamental
Pero quizás
principles
el
of
único
official
país que se
statistics, but
fue
perhaps the only
al
country
extremo
that went to the
fue
other
México.
extreme was
Somos
Mexico.
constitucionalmente
We are
autónomos,
constitutionally
no
autonomous.
dependemos
We
del
do not
presidente
depend
ni de ningún
on the
ministro.
president nor any
Somos
minister.
como el Banco
We are
Central,
like the central bank, so
pero
to
en términos
speak,
de
but
información.
in terms of data and
Y
information.
lo tercero,
And the third,
porque tenemos el mandato de coordinar
because we
el
have the
Sistema
mandate
Nacional de
to
Información
coordinate the
Estadística y
National
Geográfica.
Statistic and Geographical
tema muy
Information
relevante
System. This is
porque
relevant
en México,
because
como en
in
todos los
Mexico,
países,
like in any other country,
muchas o la gran
many,
mayoría de
or
las
at least
oficinas
most,
públicas generan
public
información.
offices generate
Generar
information,
el
generate
Ministerio o la Secretaría de
the
Educación, y la de
Education
Salud, y la de
Ministry, the
Ciencia y
Health Ministry, the
Tecnología, y
Science
el
and
Banco
Technology
Central, y
Ministry, and the Central
Economía, y
Bank, and
todo
the
mundo
Economy
genera
Ministry.
información.
All of these
Y el
generate
esfuerzo que
information.
tenemos que hacer
And our
en los
effort,
países
the
es
effort we
generar
have to
la
put forth in
información
countries is to
con las
generate
normas, conceptos,
information
clasificaciones.
under the same
Tenemos que
standards,
trabajar
classification, and sorting.
coordinadamente, y
We need to work in
afortunadamente,
coordination,
la
and
ley,
fortunately,
nuestra ley,
our
que se
laws,
publicó muy recientemente, en
very
el
recently
2008,
published in
nos da ese
2008,
mandato de coordinar el Sistema
mandates
Nacional
that
de
we
Información
coordinate the
Estadística y
National
Geográfica,
Statistical and
de tal forma
Geographical
que las
Information
normas
System. Therefore,
que
the
apruebe la
standards
Junta de
approved
Gobierno
by
de
the
INEGI
Board
son
of Governance
obligatorias
at INEGI
para
are
las demás
mandatory for
unidades
the
del
other
Estado
units
generan
of the
información.
state
Y me parece que
that
eso
are
también
generating
es
information,
muy
and it
importante.
seems to me that that is also
Señoras y
important to know.
señores, termino
Ladies
como
and gentlemen,
empecé,
I would like to conclude as I
agradeciendo
began by
nuevamente la
thanking you once
participación de
again
todos ustedes.
for your
Su
participation.
participación en
Your
este evento
participation in this
demuestra
event
que ustedes
shows
creen
that you
en el
believe
valor de las
in the
ideas
value of
para
ideas
modificar la
to
forma
modify
en
the
que
way in
entendemos
which
y
we
medimos
understand and
el
measure
comercio internacional
international
y la
trade
globalización
and
económica,
economic
y los
globalization,
felicitamos por
and
ello.
we commend you for that.
Bienvenidos nuevamente
Welcome
y muchas
all,
gracias
and
por
thank you
estar
very much
en
for
Aguascalientes.
being in Aguascalientes.